Cinderella, European folktale. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a young girl named Cinderella. She was kind-hearted and beautiful, with hair as golden as the sun and eyes as blue as the sky. Cinderella lived with her wicked stepmother and two stepsisters, who were jealous of her beauty and treated her cruelly. While they wore fine clothes and jewels, Cinderella was forced to wear rags and do all the household chores. Despite the harsh treatment, she remained gentle and hopeful, always finding a way to smile through her tears. One day, a royal messenger arrived at the house with an invitation to the grand ball at the palace. The prince was searching for a bride, and all the maidens in the kingdom were invited. Cinderella's stepsisters were ecstatic and spent hours preparing their dresses and hair. Cinderella, too, dreamed of going to the ball, but her stepmother laughed at the idea and forbade her from attending. "You, in those rags? How absurd," they mocked. As the night of the ball approached, Cinderella watched her stepsisters leave for the palace, tears streaming down her face. She sat in the garden, feeling utterly hopeless, when suddenly, a gentle light appeared before her. It was her fairy godmother, a kind old woman with a twinkle in her eye. "Why are you crying, my dear?" she asked. Cinderella explained her plight, and with a wave of her wand, the fairy godmother transformed a pumpkin into a golden carriage, mice into horses, and Cinderella's rags into a magnificent gown of silver and gold. On her feet, she wore the most delicate glass slippers. Cinderella arrived at the palace in her splendid carriage, and as she stepped into the grand ballroom, everyone stopped to gaze at her in awe. The prince, who had been indifferent until then, was captivated by her beauty and grace. He immediately asked her to dance, and the two spent the entire evening in each other's company. They talked, laughed, and danced as if no one else existed in the world. Cinderella was so happy that she completely forgot the time. As the clock struck midnight, Cinderella suddenly remembered the fairy godmother's warning that the spell would break at 12. Panicked, she rushed out of the ballroom, leaving the prince confused and desperate to follow her. In her haste, one of her glass slippers slipped off her foot, but she didn't stop to pick it up. She barely made it out of the palace before her carriage turned back a pumpkin and her gown into rags. All that was left of the magical night was the single glass slipper. The next day, the prince was determined to find the mysterious girl who had captured his heart. He sent out his servants to search the kingdom, carrying the glass slipper with them. Every maiden tried on the slipper, but it fit none. Finally, the prince's servants arrived at Cinderella's house. The stepsisters eagerly tried on the slipper, but their feet were too big. Then, Cinderella shyly stepped forward and, to everyone's astonishment, the slipper fit her perfectly. When the prince arrived and saw that Cinderella was the girl he had danced with, his heart filled with joy. He knew she was the one he had been searching for. He took her hand and asked her to marry him. Overcome with happiness, Cinderella accepted. The prince and Cinderella were soon married in a grand ceremony, and they lived happily ever after, the kingdom rejoicing in their love. As for her wicked stepmother and stepsisters, they were left to their own devices, never again to trouble Cinderella.